An island that geologically doesn't belong where it is, sitting alone in the open Atlantic, cut off from everything. A coastline being physically consumed while five-star hotels keep building on top of the rubble. And a country so small you could drive across it in 40 minutes, that once controlled the economic engine of an entire empire. You won't believe number 27. Today, 40 facts about Barbados that sound completely fake. Every single one is real. Fact 1. Pull up a map of the Caribbean. Find the island chain, that long arc sweeping from Cuba down to Trinidad. Now look to the right of it, way to the right. That isolated dot floating alone in the open Atlantic with nothing around it for 160 kilometers in every direction, that's Barbados. Not part of the chain, not near anything. Every other Caribbean island has neighbors. Barbados has ocean. That single geographic fact, the isolation, shaped every war, every trade route, and every empire that ever wanted it. Fact 2. Barbados has no river, not one. 0 rivers that reach the sea, on an island that gets 1,500 millimeters of rain every year. All of it vanishes underground within hours, swallowed by the porous coral limestone the island is built on. The entire fresh water supply of 300,000 people moves invisibly through rock, in underground streams, fractures, and caves. You cannot see it, you cannot easily protect it, and there is no backup. If the rock fails, the country goes dry. Fact 3. Every island in Barbados's neighborhood was born the same way. A volcano erupted from the ocean floor and hardened into land. St. Lucia, St. Vincent, Grenada, all of them volcanoes. Barbados broke that pattern entirely. It wasn't born from below. It was scraped upward, forced above the ocean's surface by the grinding collision of the Atlantic and Caribbean tectonic plates. Barbados is ancient seafloor, compressed ocean sediment shoved into the sky over millions of years. It is geologically a completely different object than every island around it. Fact 4. That tectonic collision is still happening right now. Barbados is still being pushed upward, 0.3 millimeters per year. That sounds meaningless until you do the math. The cliffs on the west coast that tourists photograph were once underwater. The plateau that covers most of the island was once the bottom of the sea. The island is not finished. It is still being built, slowly, invisibly, while 300,000 people live on top of it. Fact 5. While the west side of the island rises, the east side is actively collapsing into the ocean. The northeast coast, called the Scotland District, sits on ancient folded rock that is structurally failing. Cliff faces shear off into the sea. Roads are rebuilt and slide again. Houses are condemned mid-year. This is not gradual weathering. It is accelerating collapse, and it's happening on the same island at the same time as the geological rise. One half of Barbados is ascending, the other is disappearing. Fact 6. Stand on the west coast of Barbados, and you are looking at the Caribbean Sea. Flat, turquoise, warm, nearly waveless. A mirror. Walk 23 kilometers to the east coast, and you are facing the full open Atlantic. Dark, cold, violent, with swells that have been building for 4,000 uninterrupted kilometers since they left the coast of West Africa. 2 completely different oceans, 23 kilometers apart. The island is a dividing line between 2 worlds, and the contrast is so extreme it barely looks like the same planet. Fact 7. For an island that ran a global empire's most profitable trade route, Barbados has no natural harbor. Every ship that arrived had to anchor offshore in open water and move cargo to land by rowboat. For over 2 centuries, every sack of sugar, every enslaved person, every cannon, every soldier transferred across open Atlantic swells, rowboat by rowboat. The British built an entire colonial economy on an island with no safe place to dock. The geography was absurd. They did it anyway. Fact 8. The coral limestone beneath your feet on Barbados is not just rock. It is a living filtration machine. Rain falls, enters the ground, and spends weeks traveling through fractures and cave networks, emerging at the coast as purified spring water. The island's entire water supply is processed by geology. But that same system has a critical flaw. One significant oil spill in the wrong coastal location permanently poisons the aquifer. The purification system and the contamination pathway are the same system. There is no separating them. Fact 9. Every year, a river of dust leaves the Sahara Desert in Africa, lifted by wind into the upper atmosphere, and travels 8,000 kilometers west across the Atlantic. It lands on Barbados, billions of tons of it annually. That Saharan dust carries iron, phosphorus, and minerals that fertilize the island's thin soil. It also carries live bacteria, fungi, and microorganisms that have been crossing an ocean suspended in air. The Caribbean's ecosystem was partly seeded from Africa, not by ships, not by birds, by wind. The Sahara and Barbados are connected by an invisible biological highway that has been running for millions of years. Fact 10. Barbados is 34 kilometers long and 23 kilometers wide. Los Angeles is bigger. Most mid-sized American cities are bigger. In the 1650s, this speck, this single piece of lifted coral, square kilometer than any territory in the entire British Empire. Virginia was considered a disappointing consolation prize compared to it. Parliament debated trading all of what would become the eastern United States to keep Barbados in British hands. They nearly did it. Fact 11. Barbados has 660 people per square kilometer. The United Kingdom, one of Europe's most crowded countries, has 275. Bangladesh, the global symbol of extreme population density, has 1,100. Barbados sits between them, on an island with no rivers, no mountains to spread into, no neighboring land within 160 kilometers, no safety valve. Every single person on this island is packed onto a piece of coral rock smaller than a mid-sized city, with nowhere to expand and no geographic buffer if anything goes wrong. Fact 12. The trade winds that cross the Atlantic blow from east to west with near-mechanical consistency, year-round for thousands of kilometers. A sailing ship leaving the Canary Islands off Africa's coast could catch those winds and land in Barbados in 21 days. Predictably, reliably, like a scheduled service. No other island in the Caribbean had that advantage. Barbados wasn't just a destination, it was the only reliable landfall for the Atlantic crossing. Every ship, every fleet, every convoy had to pass through Barbados. Geography made it mandatory. Fact 13. Because Barbados was the unavoidable first landfall of the Atlantic, it became the entry processing point for the entire British Caribbean slave trade. Between 600,000 and 800,000 enslaved Africans arrived in Barbados first. Separated, assessed, redistributed across the Caribbean and mainland colonies. The island was not just a sugar producer, it was a human sorting hub, its position in the Atlantic wind system making it the geographic engine of one of the largest and most violent forced migrations in history. Not by political choice, by the direction of the wind. Fact 14. Before 1627, Barbados was covered in tropical dry forest, dense, continuous, layered canopy coast to coast. The British arrived. Within 30 years, nearly every tree on the island was gone. Not thinned, not selectively harvested, annihilated. Every hectare cleared for sugar. Barbados became, in 3 decades, one of the most completely deforested territories on Earth. The ecological destruction was so total, so fast, that scientists still use it as a case study in what maximum extraction colonialism does to a landscape. 30 years, an entire ecosystem erased. The deforestation created a consequence no one predicted. Barbados ran out of wood so completely that it could no longer build barrels. Sugar needs barrels. An island with no barrels cannot export sugar. So Barbados began importing timber from New England. That dependency locked the American colonies into the Caribbean plantation economy. The Massachusetts lumber industry existed in significant part to serve Barbadian sugar. Barbados's ecological collapse helped wire the economic architecture of colonial America. The deforestation of one island built the trade network of a continent. Barbados receives 1,500 millimeters of rain per year and loses essentially none of it to surface runoff. The limestone absorbs everything within hours. No puddles, no streams, no rivers. Clean geology, zero erosion. But here is the hidden cost. There is no reservoir, no lake, no surface storage of any kind. The aquifer is the only buffer between rainfall and drought. When a dry season hits, it hits the underground water table directly, with no intermediate storage to slow the drawdown. The island's geology is both its water solution and its water crisis waiting to happen. Fact 17. Barbados's land area is 430 square kilometers. Its exclusive economic zone, the ocean territory it legally controls, is 167,000 square kilometers. That is an ocean claim 388 times larger than the island itself. Inside that zone, commercial fish stocks, potential seabed mineral deposits, and, most critically, a section of the deep Atlantic that major shipping lanes pass through. Barbados does not control its ocean zone because it is powerful. It controls it because international law handed every island that geometry. The question is whether it can defend what the law gives it. Directly beneath Barbados's ocean territory lies one of the most geologically significant structures on the planet, the Barbados Accretionary Prism, a massive wedge of sediment being scraped off the Atlantic plate as it grinds under the Caribbean plate. It is among the largest accretionary prisms on Earth. Scientists drill into it specifically to study how megathrust earthquakes form, the same category of earthquake that caused the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami. Barbados is not near a dangerous geological process. Barbados is sitting on top of it. The highest point in Barbados is Mount Hillaby. It stands 340 meters tall. The Eiffel Tower is taller. And yet that 340-meter rise is the entire reason the island has a functioning agricultural interior. When trade wind clouds hit that modest elevation, they cool, condense, and drop rain, making the island's center measurably wetter than its coasts. A hill, barely taller than a skyscraper, is responsible for Barbados having farmable land. Remove that hill, and most of the island trends towards semi-arid. The entire food geography of Barbados balances on 340 meters. Fact 20. Here is the scale of what Barbados produced. In the mid-1600s, this island, 430 square kilometers of coral rock, was simultaneously influencing commodity prices in London, Amsterdam, and Lisbon. The financial instruments created to manage Barbadian sugar risk, insurance contracts, commodity futures, joint stock investment structures, became the foundational architecture of modern global capitalism. Barbados didn't just participate in the 17th century economy. The 17th century economy was, in structural terms, partially built around Barbados. A dot in the Atlantic rewired how money works. Fact 21. Barbados sits in the Atlantic hurricane corridor, but its position is a strange kind of protection. Most hurricanes intensify after passing Barbados, not before. The island sits at the entry point of the development zone, catching storms while they're still disorganized. That means Barbados rarely takes a direct hit from a major storm. But when it does, when a storm is already powerful enough to still be dangerous at that early stage, the island has no geographic shelter. In 1955, Hurricane Janet made direct landfall. The island was devastated. There was nowhere to hide. There still isn't. Fact 22. Half of Barbados's coral reef is dead. Not dying, dead. Killed by warming water, agricultural runoff, and overfishing over the past 40 years. That reef is not an amenity. It is structural engineering. A living reef absorbs 97% of incoming wave energy before it reaches the shore. A dead reef absorbs almost none. As the coral disappears, the full force of Atlantic swells, waves that have built for 4,000 kilometers, begins hitting the coastline directly. The island's natural seawall is being quietly removed. The ocean is not waiting for a replacement. Fact 23. The west coast of Barbados, the tourist side, the calm water side, where Bridgetown sits, where the airport is, where most of the population lives, averages less than 2 meters above sea level. Sea level rise projections are not abstract future math for Barbados. A 1.5-meter rise, The number scientists are increasingly calling realistic within this century permanently and repeatedly floods the capital, the airport, and the coastal infrastructure belt that the entire economy depends on. This is not a risk assessment, it is a timeline. Fact 24. The Scotland district in Barbados's northeast is not eroding, it is collapsing. The geology there, ancient, folded, structurally compromised rock, is not weakening over time, it is actively failing, now in visible episodes. Roads built across it slide into the ravines below them. The Barbados government does not have a stabilization plan for the Scotland district. The official position, formalized after decades of failed interventions, is that the land cannot be saved. Families are relocated. The land is abandoned. On a 430 square kilometer island, the government has written off a piece of its own territory as unrecoverable. Fact 25. If a Category 4 hurricane made direct landfall on Barbados, there is no refuge within the island's geography. No mountain range to absorb wind energy. No wide river valley to drain storm surge. No elevated interior plateau above the floodline. No neighboring island within helicopter range for immediate rescue. Every emergency plan bottlenecks at the same point. Aid arrives by sea or air, and both access routes can be severed by the same storm that created the emergency. The island has no geographic fallback position. It is fully exposed in every direction. Fact 26. The limestone aquifer beneath Barbados, the island's only source of fresh water, the system that filters rain through rock and stores it underground, is being invaded from below by the sea. As ocean levels rise, salt water pushes upward into the base of the aquifer through coastal fractures. Saltwater intrusion is chemically irreversible. There is no flushing process that restores a contaminated aquifer to fresh. Barbados is not watching this happen from a distance. It is happening now, measured annually at monitoring wells across the island. The clock on the water supply has already started. Northeast of Barbados, on the ocean floor, there is a scar. It stretches more than 50 kilometers. It marks where a massive section of seafloor collapsed, in geological terms, recently, possibly within the last 100,000 years. Submarine landslides at that scale generate tsunamis. The wave geometry from a collapse in that location aims directly at Barbados's flat eastern coastline. There is no functional tsunami warning system in the Eastern Caribbean capable of giving Barbados more than 10 minutes of notice. 10 minutes. The island is flat. There is no high ground to reach. 300,000 people. This is not a historical footnote. The geological process that created that scar is still active. Fact 28. Barbados earns 40% of its national income from tourism. When COVID-19 grounded international aviation in March 2020, 40% of the national economy stopped in the same week. But the deeper geographic trap is this. The beaches that make the tourism industry possible are shrinking. As the coral reef dies and storm patterns shift, the sand on Barbados's west coast beaches is no longer being replenished naturally. The beaches are getting narrower every year. The economy is built on a shoreline that is physically being unmade, and the tourists keep booking hotels on top of it. Fact 29. Barbados has no oil, no gas, no hydroelectric rivers, no volcanic geothermal heat like the islands around it. Its entire modern economy, hospitals, water pumps, refrigeration, telecommunications infrastructure, runs on diesel fuel, delivered by ship from thousands of kilometers away. A 2-week shipping disruption does not cause inconvenience. It begins to shut down the systems that keep people alive. There is no energy buffer. The island's survival infrastructure is one supply chain failure away from crisis at all times. Fact 30. In November 2021, Barbados removed the British monarch as head of state and declared itself a republic, the first Caribbean nation to do so in decades. It was a signal, not a ceremony. Across the region, small island nations are quietly repositioning toward China for infrastructure investment, toward the IMF for climate financing, toward regional blocs for collective leverage. Barbados moved first and loudest. Its geography, isolated, physically vulnerable, sitting across Atlantic shipping lanes, means every major power paid attention. This island is, again, a geopolitical fulcrum. Not because it is large, because of exactly where it sits. Fact 31. The oldest written record of rum production on Earth is a document from a Barbadian sugar plantation, dated 1647. The island's mills produced molasses as a byproduct of sugar processing. Someone fermented it. The result became the standard ration of the Royal Navy, issued daily to every sailor, and the operational currency of the Atlantic slave trade. It eventually became the most consumed spirit category on the planet. Rum is not a Caribbean product that happened to come from Barbados. Rum is a Barbadian geographic invention. Flat land, plus trade winds, plus Atlantic shipping lanes, plus the accident of fermented molasses. The entire category traces back to this island. Fact 32. The name Barbados is a ghost. Portuguese explorers passing through in the early 1500s saw fig trees along the coast with hanging aerial roots, dense, beard-like, draping into the water. They wrote, Os Barbados, the bearded ones. Within 30 years of British colonization, every one of those trees was gone. The forests were burned for sugar. The fig trees that named the island were erased alongside everything else. Barbados is named for a landscape that no longer exists. You are reading the name of a place that was destroyed before anyone thought to preserve it. Fact 33. Barbados has a literacy rate above 99%, among the highest on Earth and the highest in the Western Hemisphere. There is no oil, no minerals, no rivers for hydroelectric power, no harvestable timber. When you strip away every conventional natural resource, the only thing left to develop is the person standing in front of you. Barbados built its education system not as a philosophical choice, but as a geographic one. Human capital was the only capital the island had. The 99% literacy rate is not a policy success story. It is the direct consequence of having nothing else. Fact 34. Barbados is the first piece of land in the Atlantic that developing tropical waves encounter after leaving Africa. Those waves, the atmospheric disturbances that grow into hurricanes, pass over Barbados in their infancy before they intensify. The meteorological station on the island captures data at the precise developmental window when storm forecasting is most uncertain. That data feeds into every major hurricane model used by NOAA, the European Center for Medium-Range Weather Forecasts, and every Caribbean disaster agency. Barbados is a 430-square-kilometer early warning antenna for the entire Atlantic coast of North America. Its geography makes it irreplaceable. Fact 35. They call Barbados Little England. Anglican churches on every corner, cricket grounds, red phone boxes that still work. Parliamentary democracy older than most European nations. The most British island in the Caribbean. That is the reputation, and it is not wrong. And it was built entirely by African people. The sugar that funded those churches was grown by enslaved Africans. The food, the dialect, the music, the spiritual traditions, the social structures that give the island its living character, African, transformed through survival into something new. The architecture says England, the culture says Africa. Both are true. Neither cancels the other. Barbados is the most visible proof that geography doesn't determine identity. It just determines who gets forced together and who survives. Fact 36. When Britain abolished slavery in 1834, the government paid £20 million in compensation, the equivalent of roughly £2 billion today. Every penny went to the slave owners, not to the 80,000 enslaved people in Barbados who were freed, not to their families, not to the communities destroyed across generations. The owners received financial restitution for the loss of their property. The formerly enslaved received an apprenticeship period of continued unpaid labor. The land, the flat, fertile coastal land that the plantation system had cleared and cultivated, remained with the owners. That land distribution, set in 1834, shapes wealth inequality in Barbados today. The geography of who owns the productive coastal land is a direct, unbroken line from the plantation era. History did not end, it compounded. Fact 37. Barbados has been exporting its own people for 150 years. The island is physically too small to employ everyone born there. It is a structural arithmetic problem with no solution that doesn't involve emigration. Barbadians built the Panama Canal. They moved to Britain by the tens of thousands in the 1950s and 60s. They filled hospitals in Canada and universities in the United States. There are more people of Barbadian descent living outside Barbados than inside it. The island does not retain its population. It seeds the world with it and survives on the money those people send back. Barbados's most consistent export is not sugar and not rum. It is Barbadians. 38. Fact. Inside Barbados's coral limestone, there are caves. Harrison's Cave is the most famous, a crystallized underground world of stalactites, stalagmites, and underground streams. Some of those formations began growing during the last ice age, when global sea levels were 120 meters lower. The caves were dry, and Barbados looked nothing like it does today. Deep inside a tropical island, in a cave that tourists visit in shorts, you can find Ice Age geology, climate history locked in rock that formed when the world was unrecognizable. Barbados doesn't just sit on geological time, it contains it. Walk into the right cave and you are standing inside the Pleistocene. Fact 39. By 2100, sea level rise does not erase Barbados. It does something more complicated. It makes Barbados unlivable in its current form. The coastal strips where 80% of the population lives, where the capital sits, where the economy runs, where the food is grown, become regularly flooded, salt-contaminated, storm-hammered. The infrastructure that took generations to build starts requiring more to repair than it produces. The island will still exist on the map. The specific civilization built on it, the roads, the farms, the water systems, the 300,000-person society may not be financially or physically sustainable in its current geography. Barbados is not threatened with disappearance. It is threatened with becoming uninhabitable in place. Fact 40. Barbados should not exist the way it does. Geologically, it is an accident. Scraped up seafloor with no rivers, no minerals, no mountains, no harbor, no volcanic energy, no strategic natural gifts of any kind. And yet, it ran an empire's economy for a century. Its wind position moved millions of people across an ocean. Its molasses created rum. Its isolation created a diaspora on 5 continents. Its geography created a literacy rate that became the country's entire economic identity. Every empire that controlled this island tried to extract everything from it and leave. None of them left it diminished. The island is still rising, millimeter by millimeter, year by year, out of the same ocean that made it. That process has not stopped. The island is still being built, and the people on it are still deciding what gets built next. Right now, on the east coast of Barbados, an Atlantic wave is hitting limestone. The reef behind it is thinner than it was last year. The aquifer below it is a fraction more salt than it was last year. The coastline is not where it was 5 years ago. None of this is visible from the beach. None of it shows up on a map. Maps are snapshots. They show you where things were when someone drew them. Barbados is not a snapshot. It is a process, still rising, still eroding, still being reshaped by ocean and wind and the slow grind of plates miles below the surface. Geography isn't something that happened. It's happening right now, while you watch this.